Today I'm visiting the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust's Nature Reserve in Arundel. It's located near the south coast of England in West Sussex. The reserve covers 24 hectares and is situated on the floodplain of the River Arun. The natural habitat in the reserve for wild birds consists mainly of ponds and reed beds, but there are also some aviaries for captive, native and non-native birds. Entry is through the visitor centre, which is nestled in the reed beds and is approached by the first of the boardwalks, which are quite a feature over much of the site. The visitor centre also has a shop and an excellent cafe with views over the first of the ponds, so that you can sit and birdwatch with a coffee and a slice of cake. On passing through the visitor centre, you come to what is called the Pelican Cove. This is the home to a number of Dalmatian pelicans. Their home range extends from the eastern Mediterranean to Taiwan and from the Persian Gulf to Siberia, although they used to breed in Britain in medieval times. They're certainly very striking birds. With a wingspan of around 3 metres, they weigh about 11 kilos and are one of the heaviest flying birds in the world. They also have one of the longest bills of any bird, complete with a large pouch for catching fish. They certainly look very different to most other birds, including the coots that often share their pond. But all of these different diverse creatures are birds. Each of them are uniquely adapted to the way that they live their lives. As Darwin said in his On the Origin of Species, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. I want to look at this idea some more as I continue to explore the reserve. The next place I'm visiting is the large coastal creek aviary, with rocks, waterfalls and shoreline vegetation. The entrance and exits to this aviary are via double-door airlocks to prevent escape of non-native birds, and hence they're becoming potentially invasive species. The first birds we see are a group of avocets. Although they're shoreline birds, like the pelicans, they look completely different. They're certainly a lot smaller. They only weigh around 275 grams. Someone else described the critical activities for nearly all animals as the 3 Fs: feeding, fighting and fertilisation. The first F, feeding, accounts for a lot of the differences between pelicans and avocets. Avocets eat worms, crustaceans and small aquatic insects and their larvae, and sweep their characteristic upward curved bills from side to side in the water and soft mud, sifting for their food. Their feet are partially webbed, both to assist them in swimming and walking on mud. Also down by the water's edge is another native wader, although a much smaller one. This is the common redshank, named because of its orangey red legs. It has a similar diet to the avocet, invertebrates, small crustaceans, etc., but it has a different feeding technique, pushing its bill down into the mud, hence it has a much straighter bill than the avocet. Our next find has a very different body shape and lifestyle. With its short legs at the back of its body, it's certainly not a graceful walker like the waders. Instead, it's optimised for swimming. These are harlequin ducks. They're found across coastal regions of North America, Greenland, Iceland and Russia. They only very rarely turn up in the UK as migrants. On the water, the benefits for swimming of the strong, powerful legs can be seen, held out to the side like twin boat propellers. They can be used together for straight line thrust or separately to enable steering manoeuvrability. Harlequins are primarily diving ducks, eating the usual mollusks, crustaceans and insects, but this time fully underwater. There are two types of underwater feeding strategies for ducks: diving and dabbling. Divers dive completely underwater and while swimming are able to find food in relative deep water, but they usually have these rear-mounted legs that are inefficient for walking. Dabblers feed in much shallower water, either standing in the shallows or upending themselves in the water with their heads underneath and their rear ends in the air. Dabblers' legs are usually more centrally mounted to enable standing and walking more easily as well. Harlequins will dabble occasionally when it suits them. Smooth, dense feathers trap air for insulation, but also to give buoyancy to enable quick surfacing. Moving a bit further on, we find spectacled eider ducks. These are diving ducks too, from Alaska and northeast Siberia. These two, with their distinctive white eye patches, are males. They're a good example of a bird's form being shaped by another one of the F's, fertilisation. The male and the female look very different. This phenomenon in animals is known as sexual dimorphism and is particularly common in ducks. The female is a much more drab bird. Ducklings are very precocial. That means that almost as soon as they hatch, they're able to swim around and feed themselves. They don't need a pair of adults to work together to look after them after they've hatched. In other species, where the chicks hatch totally helpless, with no feathers and unable to feed or even see, then the cooperation of two parents is required to look after them. These are called altricial young and are a lot of work. From experience, a bit like human babies. The mother of precocial ducklings usually retains a drab colour scheme to camouflage her while she is incubating the eggs. The males develop bright breeding plumages to try to impress females. In with the spectacled eiders are some common scoters. These are UK residents, but populations are declining, and they're now unfortunately on the red list as a breeding species. Like the eiders, they are sexually dimorphic. Once again, the female is better camouflaged for nest security. They're reputed to be able to dive as deep as 30 metres. The advantage of rear-mounted legs can be seen once again here. Moving outside from the aviary, we come to a pair of ponds with a variety of ducks and geese. These little diving ducks are female buffleheads, primarily from Alaska, Canada and North America. They're a lot smaller than a lot of other ducks we've seen so far because they nest in small tree cavities, another F for fertilisation adaptation. They're a real nightmare to film because they dive without warning. You never know where they're going to pop up again. And then as soon as you found them, they're gone again. Let's move on to our last F, fighting. This time the adaptation is more behavioural rather than physical. This rather belligerent bird is a black-headed gull. Yes, I know it hasn't got a black head, but they lose that distinguishing feature in their winter plumage. Black-headed gulls really don't like anyone intruding on their personal space. They breed in large colonies and so are used to competing for space, and this behaviour continues well outside the breeding season. This isn't a breeding site, but this gull isn't letting anyone in regardless of their size or species. The leaning forward posture is a threat as they point that sharp bill at potential intruders. I found this diving duck hiding down in the corner of another aviary. It's a scaly-sided merganser from China and Siberia. This isn't a very good picture, but there's something I wanted to capture. It has small serrations along the side of its bill, which help it catch slippery small fish and amphibians in the gravel riverbeds where it hunts. F for feeding again. Continuing our exploration, we come to the longest reed bed boardwalk. In the summer, this section of reserve is alive with the sound of reed warblers and sedge warblers, although it takes a lot of patience and luck to see them. Further on, along the main path, in summertime you'll find yourself being shouted at by a Chetty's warbler, or hear the gentle plop of a water vole diving for cover. Again, you'll be lucky to see either of these. It's often a source of debate amongst birdwatchers, whether hearing something but not seeing it counts as a tick on whatever list they're compiling. The first hide I'm visiting today is called the scrape hide. There's been quite a lot of excitement here in recent weeks, as an osprey has been hanging around stocking up on fish, before what is rather a late start to its migration. Of course, by the time I get here, it's gone. Still, the star of the show today was a great white egret. This was once a rare UK visitor, but is now more common in the southeast and East Anglia and beginning to nest here. It gave quite a display, flying from corner to corner of the pond looking for fish and amphibians. They feed by standing still in shallow water and then quickly jabbing in the water, using their long flexible neck and sharp bill whenever suitable prey comes in sight. But rather than F for feeding, I would like to talk about a fourth F, which affects the bodies of birds, as well as insects and bats. F for flying. Great white egrets fly very gracefully, with long, slow wing beats, generating a lot of lift at a relatively low speed. They are also able to take off vertically from the water without a lot of the fuss and splashing about that a lot of waterfowl make. Just a quick crouch down to pre-charge their legs with elastic energy, a jump upwards and away they go. They're even able to hover for a short time to lull prey into a false sense of security before dropping down into the water. It should be noted that all of this is done facing into the wind if at all possible, to give them some initial airspeed benefit. All birds and human pilots take off into the wind if possible. For birds, saving energy is of the utmost importance. So how is such a large bird able to fly at such low speeds? The great white egret is a very large bird. It has a wingspan of typically around 1.55 metres. This gives it a wing area of 0.6 metres squared. But it has a very small body, as can be seen from this picture, and its total weight is only about 0.87 kilos. There's a measure of aircraft efficiency called wing loading. This is the weight divided by the wing area. The higher the wing loading, the greater the airspeed the aircraft needs to fly at to generate the lift it needs. The egret's low wing loading of about 1.4 kilograms per metre squared enables it to make this slow vertical landing, once again into the wind, surprising the fish and getting itself a snack. This one was having quite a successful day. It's so interesting to compare this with the takeoff and subsequent landing of Canada geese. Lots of energetic flapping and running into the wind to generate sufficient airspeed to take off, and then a high-speed landing, which requires them to put down their feet onto the water surface and water ski, using water drag to slow them down again. The Canada goose has a very similar wingspan to the egret at 1.5 metres, and hence a similar wing area, but it weighs a lot more, typically 4 kilos. So it has a wing loading of 5.9 kilos per metre squared, over 4 times greater than that of the egrets at 1.4 kilograms per metre squared. That is why, for takeoff, flying and landing, it feels the need for speed, as Maverick says to Goose in Top Gun. By the way, another F, the F-14 Tomcat fighter, has a wing loading of around 450 kilograms per metre squared. They need a much bigger pond to take off from and have to fly a lot faster. Also at the pond are our friends the black-headed gulls. These weigh 0.26 kilos and have a 1 metre wingspan, so they've got a wing loading of around 0.92 kilograms per metre squared. And they too take advantage of this in their feeding strategy of hovering just above the water before making a shallow dive to catch fish. It does require quite a lot of energy to be expended in fast flapping, but if you look at the reeds and wavelets in the water, you can see that once again they're hovering into the wind to try to reduce this. It's a bit disappointing, however, when all you catch is a leaf. Sometimes, when it all seems a bit too much effort, they try to do these little hopping dives from a swimming position, but this doesn't seem to be yielding many results here either. My next stop off was at the sand martin hide. It all seems a bit quiet out there today, but earlier in the year it's a very different story. Here's some footage I shot on my phone back in May. Either side of the hide, artificial nesting burrows have been created for the sand martins, and they have really proved popular. There are doorways either side of the viewing area to allow staff to access the back of the burrows. Nearer the visitor centre, there's a very unusual hide called the willow sphere. For those of a certain age, let's see what's through the round window. Views of another pond with reed beds and the majestic Arundel Castle in the distance. Here there was a group of mallards dabbling. As mentioned earlier, this is an alternative feeding strategy for ducks. These have their legs much more centrally mounted on their bodies. As if they were to be at the rear, like on diving ducks, they'd be lifted out of the water when the duck upended and be useless for inverted dabbling swimming control. On the way back to the visitor centre, I passed the pontoon where electric boats depart for guided safaris through the reed beds. Not today, perhaps another time. And so, as the shadows start to lengthen, I head back along another boardwalk on my way home.